Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2:02 Eastern Time. My name is Jim Hollis. I'm the Executive Director of FISPA, an association of service providers and CLECs. I'd like to welcome you to this month's webinar on LogServer considerations and solution. It's presented by vendor member TruePath Technologies. TruePath has been a vendor member of FISPA for 3 years. They've attended several of our meetings. Today's speaker is Doug Morrow. Doug is well known in the industry. He's the author of a book, Essential SMP. He's the founder and senior engineer for TruePath Technologies. He's got 20 years of experience in enterprise data centers. Like I said, he's the author. I've been on several conference calls and webinars with Doug, and I think everybody who attends this webinar is in for a treat on his expertise and his understanding of what needs to be done to monitor and babysit your data centers.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. Again, this is Douglas Morrow from TruePath Technologies. What we're going to do today is talk about LogServer considerations. Everybody that I talk with at one point or another needs some sort of LogServer. With that, really what that means is that they have a whole bunch of servers that they have to go to and look at logs. Logs are very common. They're in servers, they're on consoles, they get tailed and catted out to all sorts of different files. And really where the struggle is being able to just maintain those logs in a central repository, being able to dig through them, being able to pull that all together in a meaningful way. And what customers do a lot of times, enterprises do a lot of times, is just create a quote-unquote log server, a syslog server, and start dumping everything to it. And that can be very difficult and troublesome in about 1 million different ways. But what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about what a log server sort of is, what can give logs, what about gathering all those logs, what kind of information can we get from the logs, being able to break it up into not just one gigantic full text string search, but being able to break it up into some sort of variables. And then some key features to look for in a log server solution. We're going to take a little bit of time to talk about architecture and integration, and then take a look at the solution from TruePath that we're pretty excited about. We're also going to go into a live demo, and like Jim said, you guys are unmuted. You have any questions, comments along the way, feel free to interrupt, and we can take them as we go along. So let's talk about sort of what gives logs. Well, the bigger question is what doesn't give logs. It seems like switches, servers, applications, UPSs, environmentals, everything sort of gives logs out there. And if it doesn't give logs, it might do something that then ends up boiling down to creating a log. An example, a power supply rack PDU might send traps. Well, traps aren't logs, but you send the traps to the SNMP server, your NMS, it's going to have to start logging that. And if you don't have the ability to decode the OIDs or SNMP, you're just going to have a whole bunch of logs that are sitting there. So when we talk about logs, we really need to look back and really say, geez, almost everything within the environment has the ability to then, create logs. One big piece that when we talk about log server solutions, we need to be careful of the licensing, because what happens is that, and this is, I think the industry would agree with me, is that when we have a log server, you want to have everything in, or as much as you can within that log server. You don't want to be shorted based on licensing. Splunk is one of the biggest log server solutions out there. It's an absolutely awesome tool, but it's really expensive. A lot of customers that we talk to and work with absolutely love it. It has its own programming language and graphing and dashboards, but it can be really expensive because what happens is they charge you per the gig. So when you have one server that somebody turns debug mode on or something funky like that, it blows through your license. And it's good for Splunk because they say, well, we'll go ahead and we'll add a little bit more. But the problem is, from an architectural organizational standpoint, the view gets tightened because they say, well, let's not add our development. Let's not add this. Let's not add that because we have to stay within our license. And so when we came up with our solutions and our considerations, we said, well, what can we do to basically not have it limited by the license, but sort of limited by your bandwidth and your hardware that you can throw at it. So with that, let's take a look at what sort of a traditional log setup looks like. We've got a log server in the middle, whatever that may be. It could be a physical server, could be a virtual ESX, virtual host. On the left-hand side, we have all of our devices and objects that we talked about, our switches, our servers, our applications. People say, well, geez, how do we do it with the applications? Well, the application may just write its own log. I've written a lot of programs, and you have to pipe it to opt-local tpt log / something.txt. Well, how do I get that into the log server? Well, one way to do that is to go through the syslog facility, or maybe just share that opt-local tpt directory through NFS or share, and the log server could then slurp all that up into its format, or it may just be able to use that as another source. Now that we've got all this great stuff in our log server, well, what can we do from a human readable, usable standpoint? Well, most of the time it's going to be a web-based interface. You might be able to SSH into it to sort of do some down and dirty work, to do some APIs. And also, the important thing is, what about getting alerts, right? If I have to go in there and look for a failed VPN, I guarantee I'm going to miss it. But if I can set up my log server to look for that, and when it comes in, send an alert, that's going to be more powerful to me. When we talk about logs, format is king. Like I said earlier about me creating my own software and application, I tell you what, I probably didn't stick to any standard when it comes to writing my log files, because at the time it's just sort of debug informational. Well, unfortunately, the good and the bad of the industry is everybody sort of has their own format. There is somewhat of a standard when it comes to sort of syslog. Cisco likes to stick to their sort of versions, and what I try to do is give you an idea here to just take a look at how things can be broken up. And it's important because when we look at how to dissect that information into the syslog, we need to know what these separators are. So on the left, you can see the column 1 through 6. We have a timestamp, a log host, an application process, a syslog facility level, whether it's critical, alert, notify, info, debug, the message ID, and the message itself. The one that's color-coded there, the timestamp facility, and the message text, that's a Cisco image that we have there. And I gave 3 different samples. So you say, oh, great, well, we have a standard here. Well, let's take a look at the first one. Well, that looks a little different. And then the second one, I believe the first is from Apache, the second is from a PIX firewall, and the last is from syslog. So you say, oh, geez, how do we break this up? And why is it important to break it up? Because we don't want to always just do a full text search. If I search for the word alert, in the bottom it looks like, well, it says service alert. So, and the critical, it's hard and critical, and the interface G2, it says it's down. So that makes sense. But what happens then if somebody says no alert off a switch? Well, now I'm going to get an alert, I'm going to see that as a problem. So what we can do is we can break it up in sort of variables to where we say if the application process equals this, if the log host is equal to this, or if the message ID or facility level is equal to this, then do something. So we're not just doing a full text scan across all of it. And so it boils down to format is king. You really need to know how things are pushed out. So let's talk a little bit about slicing and dicing here. So this sort of continues on to where we look at the top, which is a typical syslog. And I broke it up to where you see it date, time, service, proc, and then message. And you see May 23rd, 12:30, into OP5, Merlin D is the process, and the message being attempted to reconnect the database and rerun the query. Now what's important here is that you can see on the next one, I color-coded it because now we can start breaking things up into what I'm calling those variables. So you can see we have date and time, service proc, service alert, location name, port location, alarm level, and if we know the format, we can now say things like only show me the alarm levels of critical, only show me the alarm levels of critical and the port locations that equal or contain Ethernet. And that's going to give me some tighter control over the results. And in the image below, you can see that I have a real variable for our web log, which is remote address. And so here you'll see, this is from our demo that we'll see in a little bit, that now that I've broken up that remote address into a variable, I can say, hey, give me a quick graph, give me a quick pie chart and some numbers on what the top remote addresses are. So you can see how powerful that is, just without trying to have to dig through a billion logs to say, geez, how many times does this IP address come at us? You can quickly do that with this kind of slicing and dicing. So now we understand a little bit about the architecture. We'll look more, later. We understand about how all these are going to be going into the server. The big question can be, though, is what about the size and the frequency of the logs coming in? And what I did is BuzzCircuit has a LogServer calculator that talks about events per second. This can be used just sort of as a rule of thumb, just to get an idea of what's going on. We grabbed like 5 Windows servers, 5 Unix servers, a firewall, a router, a couple of switches, and a VPN. And you can see their estimated number of events per second that are sitting there. So we're talking 15 total devices. Doesn't seem that big. We're going to use an average size of the message, of the syslog message, to be about 1K. Now that varies, but bear with me, let's just say it's 1K. So what we're looking at, our total events per day is just about 7 million events. So we're looking at about 7 gigs a day for this small network environment. And that's really, important to know, because you can very easily do 7 times 30 times times 12 for the year and start looking at this kind of data, because the first thing people say is, oh, well, I want to be able to search this data for 1 year or 3 years or something like that. And it really starts to add up. I mean, you take this modest environment and put it into sort of more realistic environments, then you're going to start seeing how important it is to really architecture it correctly, not just from a bandwidth standpoint, but also from your IOPS. You can go over to Best Buy right now and go grab a 2 or 4 or 6 terabyte external drive for cheap. But the issue is going to be the IOPS. When we have these events per second coming in, we really need to have the architecture hardware be able to have high number of IOPS for in a RAID configuration. What you don't want to have happen is you don't want to start losing logs because your system basically has I/O weight. So when we look at when you step back and look at your environment, you really need to see sort of what are the kinds of devices that are going to be sending me logs. And the other thing from a rollout standpoint is start with different types first. A lot of times people say, well, I'm just going to start banging through everything and start throwing in syslog. That's not very easy to do. Let's start with our Windows servers. Let's set that up. Let's get a feel for that. Let's see how that goes. Maybe it's not 3 per second. Maybe it's 50 per second. We have to sort of do a little bit of course correction. It's really important. When we break those variables up, you'll see pretty much that every single one of these is going to have sort of a little bit different format. So as you roll these out, my suggestion is take a look at the Windows server. See how the logs are. Get your variables right. Get your dashboards up. Go to the next one. Go to your Unix. Go to the firewall, and so on. We talked about the traditional, log setup there where, one's in the middle. Well, let's talk a little bit more important to where we have a highly available log server. One of the 3 key pieces to a log server is scalability. Everybody and anybody, it's like candy out there. People say, oh, you got a log server. Oh, let me just start pointing my stuff to it. You're like, oh my God, who just brought the log server to its knees? And it's because you can very, very easily turn the floodgates onto a log server. And if you have a chatty device, which you might not even know you have a chatty device sort of until it's too late. You might have something in debug or informational or somebody doing applications, and they just leave it on there because maybe on the server it rolls over, so no one knows. But when you pump that one server into LogServer, it can really slow things up. The other piece, too, to think about is where is your monitoring software? There are some monitoring software packages out there like SolarWinds, like OP5, that have the log servers that are integrated in themselves. And you have to be very delicate with that because, again, if you have an influx of logs, you are going to prevent your monitoring from going on. So just because somebody out there put some application in debug mode, you now have lost visibility to your core network. So that's a big no-no, and those are the kinds of things that slow rollouts, slow movements, slow turning the dials you'll be able to see that before it happens. Here's a nice list of key features, and of course we want it all. Like I said, ability to scale, huge. Load balance, that's the biggest thing. A lot of people are out there with these ginormous servers with, single servers with high CPU, high memory, high disk space, and when things get slow, they just add more to it. And a lot of times there can be an Achilles heel, which just won't make it any faster until you start growing horizontally to where you have load balance servers. The other piece with load balance is highly available. Log servers are great. People start putting more and more meat, more and more money into it, more and more views, start to rely on it more. If that thing goes down, it starts becoming a production application. So we need the ability to have highly available. This can all be the best thing in the world, can be gold, but if it's buried 10 feet under ice, it's no good to us. So if we can't use this, if there isn't a nice web interface, if there isn't a cool dashboard we can take a quick view at, or some API scripting so people want to get in the weeds can totally do it, it's not going to be worth anything to us. We've got to have a nice interface. And it seems as though people are really starting to go that way because they can see that it's not just, well, you have to put this crazy query in. There's a little bit of fuzzy logic and whatnot, being able to break those variables up and then also turn them into some quick charts and graphs so you can make some cool looking dashboards. Compression, if you need it, we need to be able to turn on compression, and we also want it to be able to auto-compress. I don't want to have to, by no means do I want to have somebody say, oh, every 3 days I got to go in and compress the logs. No way, you won't do it, you'll forget, and your log server will fill up, and its last message will be log server full. With that said, a lot of those will do it, but what I find is a key feature is the ability to uncompress and search the archives. So I have compressed last week's worth of data. Now somebody comes up with a denial of service request or syntax that I need to search. I don't want to have to jump through hoops to be able to uncompress all my stuff. To go into the CLI and have to gun zip and have to tar it and move it and reindex and do all that kind of stuff, that's got to be done on the fly. Again, that gets back to the easy-to-use web interface. We want to be able to do that quick and easy, and if it's compressed or uncompressed, I, the user, shouldn't know it. We get into the alerts. We want to be able to set up alerts on preset conditions with those sort of variables that I'm calling them. Denial of service, VPN failures, auditing, custom alerts, it goes on and on. But you need the ability to set up those kinds of alerts and to be able to, the last piece is be able to integrate with other tools. I might not want to be able to send an alert directly to a user, but I need to have the ability to integrate that alert and push it to the other monitoring server, be able to push it to OP5, be able to push it to SolarWinds, be able to push it to Nagios, so that there's sort of one throat to choke when it comes to contacts, alerts, business hours, and how we contact users and whatnot. And that truly is a key feature. And another big piece here that I skipped over is to be able to ingest different log file formats. So we want to be able to have that Cisco PIX firewall, the Apache log, the syslog, the Douglas's TruePath crazy log debug mode. We want to be able to have all of that, and the log server should be able to handle those kinds of things. We'll talk a little bit about integration. This is a slide actually from another FISPA presentation that I gave, and one thing is a single pane of glass is really a pipe dream. It's very, very difficult to have one single pane of glass, and I work with some huge customers that are still trying to chase that, because what happens is you end up with a lot of tools. But with this, with the log server, you can, what I was just explaining, is be able to push those alerts to your network monitoring system, to your Tivoli, to your SolarWinds, to your OP5 or Nagios, and then have that be able to push those alerts out to the users, be able to run the reports based on that. So you have your switches and your servers pushing syslogs to your log server. You have your open source tool ingesting those alerts and getting those alerts, but your users now are logging into one web server, which is the NMS tool itself. This actually is a pretty straightforward, simple thing to do. When you have about 9 other tools that you're trying to push under it, it can get difficult. So let's talk about our lovely LSS, which is our log server solution. What we did, and I'm just going to give you a quick sales pitch here, and then I'm going to go into the demonstration. But really what we wanted to do is we had all these customers time and time again keep asking us about log servers. And we thought it was time to basically, instead of doing all these custom log server solutions with all these different softwares, to be able to pick the best one that we've used, put that into a solution, into a hardware appliance, and be able to not only deliver it, but then to be able to configure it. And people say, well, why don't I just download the free log serving software? The exact same reason why you don't download the C++ compiler package and come up with your own software, because it's time to market. You need a log server solution today. You can install it and get it up and running, but is it going to give you the dashboards and the format and the ingestion that you really need to disseminate all the different log files that are coming in? And TruePath is a services company, and we really wanted to provide that to customers. So not only do we give you the hardware appliance, but we give you the service that back it, so that we can sit and say, oh, this is the syslog format. Let me go ahead. We've got services around ingesting the next type of format, helping you do the next application, writing the dashboard so that you can actually have a usable log server. And of course, our log server scales. It scales on many, many different levels, but it's a great way to get people a log server that can work right out of the box. Simple 1U rack mount, TB of solid-state disk, got a RAID controller, quad processor. It can be expanded for more storage and failover, and highly available, and the first year break fix is included. So we basically ship this thing off to you pre-configured. We provide the remote support to get you going for the syslog format, get you those variables running, and customers have really liked it. So let's get to the fun part, which is the live demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my server here, and we're going to get into the main screen. So what we're looking at here is the front end of the log server. It gets down to, you can get to some very down and dirty quick searches here, where I can just start typing in plain text. I can even get into some of the query strings to be able to sort of break up some of those variables. And what we're looking at is the search for the last 5 minutes. So you can see we've got some histograms here. I'm going to change this over to take a look at the last 2 days. When I do that, it's going to change some of the messages. It's going to change the histogram and whatnot. It's going to give me some more information. And what we're going to do in a little bit is we're going to start looking at some of the dashboards. So I'm going to actually bring those dashboards up in the background here so we can take a look at them. Here we have an OpenVM dashboard, a Unix, and a DHCP. I'm going to load that up. On the left-hand side, we have what I was calling earlier the variables. These are our different fields. So depending on the kind of logs that we've ingested and the way that we've broken them up, we can actually sort through these and take a look at the different variables. And if I click on, for instance, remote user, remote address, I can poke in here and say, give me some quick values on remote address. And it's going to go through the last 2 days, and it's going to break it up like this. And this was the one from the presentation. So we found about 101,000 messages with this field and 51,000 messages without it. So it's important because we may say, well, geez, shouldn't every one of those have all of that in there? You can do the same thing when we look at some of the other ones. So we can say response bytes. We can look at the statistics for it. We can generate a chart for it, and we can even add this to the particular dashboard. So down here, you'll see that we've got the MongoDB, this is it right here. So response bytes, total, mean, median, max, standard deviation, the sum, cardinality. So again, just the ability to do some quick statistics on it. If I type the word, let's see, failed in here, notice it starts to put some information in here for me, some of the different fields. So I'm just going to type the word plain text failed in there and see if I can come up with some information that's actually useful. And then I'll be able to show you some other items that we can take a peek at. And these are the actual messages. These are the logs that before everything, the second time you'll be able to see more information. If I click on this guy here, it's going to break it up for me and show me where all the breakups, all the fields, all the variables. So you can see where I'm getting it. It's routed into my Unix request stream. You'll see the facility, you'll see the level, the message, access, source, version. It's all right there. And one thing I can do is I can easily say, hey, look at this right here. This is my Graylog web server, or Unix access equals true. I can add this one to my search string automatically. And you'll see it's failed and Unix access equals true. So you can very quickly start to dive down and get a little deeper into this. Let me take you into some of the dashboards. This is one of the things that our LogServer solution helps you with, is we get one of these dashboards going for you based on the syslog. This is the dashboard we created with the DHCP overview. So quite frankly, you can look at the DHCP IPs over the last 2 days, who's been asking for them, what are the types over the last few days. Here's the customer VM DHCP counts. You can see here we've got the average response. And here's where we did a little bit of a DHCP denial of service, to where you'll see that we started to really hit our service here and started to banging on it for the DHCP. If we go into our VPN, again, these are all editable dashboards that allow us to be able to look at things in full screen. You can move these around. You can look at sort of event counts. You can set alerts on it very easily. Hey, if this event count gets above 2,000 over the last hour, I need to know about it. I need you to send that to Nagios. I need to be alerted on it. And that's the kind of thing that we can do with the LogServer. Here's a great one, failed authorizations by username. So in the last few days, we've gotten the Tiffany, Root, and Bob all tried to log in unsuccessfully to our VPN. This is a standard Unix overview one here. And what we're looking at is the number of requests that we've gotten in the last 24 hours. 400s in the last 24, so we've got 73, 500s, 286. And you can see some response codes right here. So we can take a look at these response codes, and I just refreshed it. But the other thing is, take a look. We can go down to this, and we can look at the same kind of information, and we can look at response status. We can look at quick values. We can look at the request path. So there's a quick way to just take a look at that and say, okay, I want to see this. I want to see a quick value on this for the last 2 days. Again, to me, the power of this is the ease of finding the data that you're truly looking for. And once you're in it, you have this sort of breadcrumb trail to be able to start diving deeper and deeper. So I've looked in the last 2 days. I've got failed and Unix access equals true. I want to add 404s or maybe 200s to it. And again, we start diving deeper and deeper to it. And here we can turn on all the different fields to be able to see it here. I now with that can say, well, I want to be able to see the remote address. I want to have some quick values on the remote address for this. Now that I found my 200s, how many of the 200s fall within the certain IP address range? And that's what we can get from here. All sorts of different, you can have line charts, you can have pie charts, you have quick views like this. You can run the query that was used to generate this. So you say, well, what does this request in the last 24 hours mean? If I click on this play button, it's actually going to take me right to the search string with that information in it, where somebody could say, yeah, that's good, the last 24 hours is fine, but give me the last 24 hours minus all the 404s. Well, how the heck do we do that? Well, you click on this, it takes you back to the search string, allows you to put that in, and then you can start dialing in even more. And this was from before with our remote address. So we've got failed, Unix access true, response status is 200, and we did some quick values, and you can see that we've got 92. This guy's hit these credentials 92 times. Oh, and by the way, of course, we can save this. This can be the intern, intern failed logins with response code 200. And from now on, you'll be able to get right to it. And these are the messages that fall into that as well. So you can start fencing things out to say, well, you know what, that's great, but why do we have all of these ones with the 1.148s in it? Let's go ahead and take that out. And you can easily do that. This gets back to where we were looking at the messages from before, and you'll see the histogram here broken up by the hour. And we're getting up into the fields that were for that dashboard. So when I did a replay on it, it's showing me the search string that was used. I won't go into all of the intricacies of it, but of course we can have different sources, we can have different streams, we can break things up like I was showing earlier to where we can have these messages and break them up into what are called fields or variables. And then we can start not only searching and save searching, but we can make meaningful dashboards and alerts to find the information that you're really looking for. But I think that gives a good overview of our setup for our LSS LogServer solution. If anybody has any questions or comments on that, of course, would love to talk more about it. This is the sources. These are the sources that are coming in right now. We've got our Unix log servers, our MongoDB, our Graylog servers, our Elasticsearch, and our etcd that's sitting on there. And if I want to just see these particular ones, I can start breaking it up by clicking on this. It'll take me just to take a look at that. Maybe an IP address falls into another log, but I only want to see this one. You can quickly do that by using the magnifying glass. Would anybody like to see anything else within the demo?
Hi, Doug. This is Derek. I'm going to have to drop off in about 5 to 10 minutes. Question. You talked about scalability. So this is all contained within a 1U box. How does the SLL solution scale, and are there any limits to its scalability?
Great question. So the back end of the LogServer solution is Elasticsearch. So it has the ability to really scale horizontally, meaning that you can have another LSS server that can be load balanced. You can have another LSS server that is just ingesting some high message count logs and pushing only certain logs to your LogServer solution. So there are a ton of ways, and it scales through the roof because you have the ability to then have your LogServer solution and load balance just database servers. You can have 3 LogServer solutions and have a web server that is spread across all 3. So what's great about Elasticsearch is that they really give you the scalability and distributedness on all different parts, depending on where your load is. And we help do that with our services and our LogServer solution. good question.
Yeah, that's great. Great presentation.
Thank you. A little bit more reading. If you want to go home and curl up, you can read some of the RFCs, 5424 and 3164. It's the syslog protocols. Not on the top 10 bestseller list, but still some interesting reading. Cisco's got a nice overview of the syslog protocol, and here's a link to the log calculation tool that I used. Again, that just gives you a quick idea of maybe where to start. But like I said, you could have devices that have 10 times magnitude more than another server or device that you think, because quite frankly, you could have any device and just turn logging off. So it gives you a great place to start at least. So what I want to do here is the three big things wrapping up. In conclusion, there's really three things that we need to think about when we're talking log solutions. Who's going to be giving me logs? Where am I getting those logs from? How am I getting those logs? What's the bandwidth considerations? Again, logs can be very, very large, and if you have a small pipe from California to New York, you better make sure that you have the bandwidth to accommodate those logs and the size of those logs. The second thing is then, how much logs are we talking? Are we talking 10 logs? Are we talking 1 million logs? We can turn a log server on and basically ditch the logs, but count the number of logs to get an idea. So we have log server solutions that are out there, and people say, hey, can we turn it on for a VPN? Sure, let's do it, but let's not do anything with those logs. Let's just get an idea for a couple days. Is it going to be 1 billion logs a day, or is it going to be 6 logs per day? Then we can do a little course correction to see, hey, do we need to put another load balancer in, or we need to do something else to make sure we don't affect the rest of the landscape. And the last thing is can my obviously easy-to-use software, can it scale? Can we add those new VPN servers? Can I add my 600 Windows servers? Do I have the ability to point to it? And like Derek asked earlier about the scalability is, our back end allows us to scale at different areas. It's not just taking X and putting another X. We can take sort of X.1 and just have a redundant or failover 0.1, meaning we can have just a load balanced front web end, or we can have a triple load balanced database in the back end because maybe we're doing more reads and writes and things like that. So it's really important. These 3 points are the kinds of things that you need to, when you kick down the doors of looking at log servers, these are the things that you should be thinking about. Just going to wrap up with saying thank you to Jim, thank you to FISPA, thanks for everybody that came to this webinar. Again, my name is Douglas Morrow, founder and senior engineer at TruePath Technologies. Thank you.